Movement is life. Strength comes by exercise. There is no other way. Stagnant pools breed disease and stagnant bodies breed disease. Exercise is vital. I was talking to a lady one day about her high blood pressure. She said, I'm doing everything. I'm drinking my water. I'm eating the right food. I'm going to bed early. I said, are you exercising? She said, well, I'm busy all day long. Sorry, that doesn't do it. Many people are busy all day long. I used to think that because I'm busy all day long. Michael says, you can't hold me down. I love to do things. So I never actually exercised. And then one day I was in New Zealand giving a series of lectures, and I was staying with a lady who was twice my size, 10 years younger than me, and she says, Barbara, I do a 5K walk every morning. Would you like to join me? I said, sure. Because at that point, this is 14 years ago, I still had a few kids at home and I had to get them up in the morning, get the breakfast on and the wash on. I said, I'd love to. 5K walk. After 3Ks, I couldn't keep up with her. The next day when I woke up, my legs were incredibly sore. I could hardly walk. She said, are you coming this morning? I said, sure. Even though my legs were sore. I was the health speaker. I was giving a series of lectures. I was speaking on exercise. So of course I went. She had a friend with her this morning. I think that by the end I was about 1 kilometre behind. I went home, my soreness had gone, but I learnt my lesson. It was at that point I realised exercise, taking a spot out of your day where you target some form of physical activity, is totally different to being busy all day. And you know what they say, no pain, no gain. I'd gone through my pain. I wanted to maintain my fitness now, and so I began to do a morning walk. I began to walk for approximately half hour, did approximately 2Ks every morning, and my fitness levels rose up and up and up. And I was excited about it. And in about another 3 years, Michael joined me. But I have found in the last couple of years, there is a type of exercise that will get the body up onto a far better rate of running. And I think that's what everyone's interested in. I was speaking to an osteopath in Melbourne a few years ago. She said, I have a few clients that go to the gym 3 days a week. She said, they are relatively fit, but she said, they're not increasing their fitness. And I thought to myself, this is a puzzle. Obviously, they're better off than people that do nothing, absolutely. But I myself, and I think most people I meet, are interested in a type of exercise that will get the body up onto a better, more efficient, and more effective rate of running. And there is a type of exercise that will do that. And most Olympian trainers, champions, are implementing this now. It's called interval training. Have you heard of interval training? Interval training, the very name of it indicates what it is. It's intervals of high intensity and intervals of recovery, done for a certain cycle. And it was probably first documented in about the 30s, where a German physiologist was training his athletes in interval training. Bursts of high intensity, bursts of recovery. And he found when it came time for the event, his athletes had an edge. Every athlete that enters the race has the ability to win the race, but the one that wins is the one who just has that edge. And they found that this type of training gave them that edge. Then the war came, many things were lost. And the next time it was documented was probably the late 80s, early 90s, where a Japanese trainer named Tabata, he was training his figure skating girls in interval training. And this is what he did. He got them to do a high intensity of 20 seconds. And then he got them to do a recovery time of 60 seconds. And this was done for a cycle of 6. Doesn't take very long, does it? And he found the same thing, that his girls had an edge. His girls were breaking records. His girls were bringing home golds. They just had that edge, which defines gold from silver, from bronze, for those who don't get a medal. And it was about 2 years ago I read a book called Body by Science by Dr. Doug McGuff. He's a cardiovascular doctor in America. And he heard of the interval training. And he began to implement in his own life a 30 seconds high intensity, a 90 seconds recovery. And he also did this for a cycle of 6. And he says in his book that he couldn't believe what it did for him. His brain was clearer, he was sparkier through the day, he was sleeping better at night, his digestion improved, his colon improved. He said it got to the point where he couldn't hold him down. He seemed to have so much energy. And he began to implement this with his cardiovascular patients. And he found the same thing. The results were amazing. But something else happened. He found that his patients on antidepressants were coming off their antidepressants. He found that his patients on high blood pressure, and of course this is what he did it for heart, it was coming back to normal. Cholesterol was coming back to normal. But something else happened. His diabetic patients were coming off their insulin. He scratched his head with this. He thought, wow, this is amazing. And what I am ever grateful to Doug McGuff for is how he takes you inside the cell. And he shows from inside of the cell why all of these results are happening in the body. Because as I've pointed out this week, that we are just a bunch of cells. And the happenings inside this cell basically is happening in the liver cell, the eye cell, the brain cell, everywhere. So understanding what's happening inside the cell gives us an idea of why these results are happening with this interval training. Before I go there, let me define high intensity. High intensity is running for your life. Can't run. Cycling for your life, can't cycle. Swimming for your life. It's going as hard and as fast as you can go. That's your high intensity. What's recovery? Well, if the person's not very fit, their recovery might be leaning against a post and going, whew. If the person's very fit, it might be just a little jog backwards and forwards. For a cyclist, high intensity cycling up the hill. Recovery is just gliding down the hill. So that's your recovery time, done for a cycle. What Doug McGuff shows that when we're getting into easily the second set of high intensity, this is already speeding up. 20 steps speeding up, 8 steps speeding up. Remember, I'll define that for you again. The glucose goes in under the action of insulin. It goes through a 20-step pathway. That 20-step pathway, called the glycolytic pathway, gives us 2 units of energy. Only 2 units of energy because it's an anaerobic pathway. That means it does not use oxygen. The end result of those 20 chemical reactions is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate gets fed into the 8-step pathway. The 8-step pathway is called the powerhouse. This is the Krebs cycle inside the mitochondria. That 8-step pathway is called the powerhouse because it delivers a whopping 36 units of energy. Wow. And we looked at the other day, it is oxygen that makes the difference. So this is your aerobic pathway. What I didn't tell you the other day is that this is a very fast pathway. This 20-step pathway is fast, but this 8-step pathway is slow. And on the normal running of things, this is how it works, and it works very well. But when someone starts to do high intensity, both pathways speed up, and we're not surprised. Your muscle's requirement for more glucose, more oxygen increases. It speeds up, and it speeds up to such a rate that more pyruvate is being made than can be fed into the powerhouse. You see, this one will always be slower than this one. And when it all speeds up, more pyruvate is being made than can be fed into the powerhouse. So what the body does is it stores the excess pyruvate as lactic acid. So the lactic acid stores up, specifically here, we're talking about the muscle cell. So the lactic acid stores on the side in the cell. And then the person goes through recovery time. Slowing down. In recovery time, the liver converts that lactic acid back to pyruvate and feeds it in the powerhouse. This is an amazing piece of information, because do you know what it means? When you're in recovery time, your body is burning just as much fuel at just as fast a rate as if you were going for it. That's the good news. So the recovery time is not an excuse because you're not fit. It's actually essential. Because if you don't have that recovery time, what's happening to your lactic acid? It's building up in the cell. So what's happening to your 5K jogger? That lactic acid is building up in the cells and actually getting quite painful. And it's quite possible if when I started to do this 5K walk, I had little intervals of recovery time, I might not quite have had as much pain in my leg, though the pain I was experiencing was the broken muscles building up to stronger muscles because I'd started to work muscles to the point that I had not worked them before. This is a powerful piece of information, and I'm ever grateful to Doug McGuff for showing this. So the recovery time is vital, because it's in the recovery time that excess lactic acid is converted back to pyruvate and fed down into the powerhouse. Now remember, it's not the odd day you do it and the odd day you don't. And why I mention this now is, this is the best training for someone who's going to do the 10K jog, who's going to run in the city to surf. In fact, trainers are finding now that when their athletes do the interval training, they have got more stamina, more endurance, more energy when they do those long runs, if they train like this. So this is the way you train for your long distance. Coming up to the long distance, you might do a long distance once a week, just in preparation, so your body knows what's coming. But it's the interval training that gets the body up into a better state of running because of the intervals of high intensity and recovery. So I was very impressed with this. So I began to implement it in my life. I started to do a 30 seconds high intensity. I can assure you that 30 seconds is a very long time when you're going for it. Whew! At 20 seconds, my body's saying, enough! And I thought, how can I ask the guests at Misty Mountain Health Retreat to implement this, who are mostly a little unfit, when I, who is probably a little above average fitness, am struggling to fit it in? About that time, a friend of mine heard a talkback radio show. It was an interesting show because the government funded this, cost something like a couple of $1 million. They got a group of doctors to get about 30 people together, very unfit, obese, high blood pressure, diabetic, and they put them on interval training, dietary changes as well, and they put them on a 7 seconds high intensity with a 14 seconds recovery time for a cycle of 7. For a cycle of 7, I was immediately interested. One, because I think anybody can do 7 seconds. Another is I'm a Bible student, and the number 7 is part of the numerical design all the way through the Bible. There are 7 days in a week, there are 7 holes in our head, there are 28-day cycles, cycle of 7. So I was interested in the 7 number. I read another book called Pace by Dr. Al Sears. And in his book, he recognises the value of the interval training, but he takes it one step further. He says, play around with it. He says, do 7 seconds one time, 30 seconds another, 10 seconds another, 15 seconds another. And really, your recovery time is dependent on basically how long it takes till you got your breath back and your heartbeat has settled down. Al Sears tells of a lady who was very unfit in her late 50s who did 7 seconds high intensity, and she needed a 15-minute recovery time. Whoa! Not many people are quite that unfit. The good news is, as she continues this every day, it will not remain at a 15-minute recovery time. Your fitness is not dependent on how hard and fast you can go, but how long you take to recover. And as you monitor your progress, you will start to see that your recovery time will come less and less and less. And that is your indicator on your fitness level improving. At Misty Mountain Health Retreat, we find that even in 1 week, the guests are surprised at how their fitness level is increasing. Remember, not how hard and fast and far you can go, but how long you take to recover. So with Dr. Al Sears and his book, Progressive Acceleration of Cardiopulmonary Exertion, there's the pace, progressive. It's progressive. It's like the lady who took 15 minutes to recover the first time she did it. It's progressive. It will not be 15 minutes within a couple of days even. It's progressive. Your fitness is progressive. Acceleration. You are accelerating. You're going as hard and as fast and as far as you can. That comes back to what I've been sharing with you. You're the doctor. How long does it take? Progressive acceleration, you are accelerating. Cardiopulmonary, cardio, indicating how the heart is increasing. The more you use that heart, the stronger it gets. My son Peter, at the age of 25, he was training for a triathlon. And in his training, he was doing long jogs, up hills, down hills every evening. And of course, automatic interval training. About that time, he's a tiler. He was dismantling a vanity unit in a building and it had a huge chip out of it. It slipped out of his hand and hit his ankle. It would have chopped his foot off if he hadn't had a bone there. It was a mighty blow. And the blood hit the roof. In fact, he was calling out to his brother James, who was outside, who's also a builder. He said, "James, quick." James said, "I'm on the phone, mate." Peter said, "I think you better come." So James did come in and he said, "Mum, all the walls and all the roof were covered in blood." Do you know why? Well, they found out when Peter got to hospital. Well, they wrapped him up and took him in. The nurse took his pulse. His resting heart rate was 51 beats per minute. That's a strong heart. That explains why the blood hit the roof. If Peter's heart rate had been 90 beats per minute, it would have just gone maybe to the top of the window. But because his resting heart rate was 51, an indication of a heart that is so strong, so efficient, it doesn't have to beat much. Because every beat that it makes is so strong, so powerful, that the blood hit the roof. Good news is the doctor was very amazed at this cut because it didn't cut through any main tendons. He kept getting him to move his toe. I said to Peter, "It's your mother's prayers. She's over you every day." Maybe the angels just guided that big clunk either side. But it's an indication of how that heart can change. You know, genetics has got nothing to do with this one. Peter had that strong heart rate because every day he was in training, and the more you do it, the stronger that heart gets. So let's have a look. We're looking at Dr. Al Sears' book, Pace, Progressive Acceleration of Cardiopulmonary. Pulmonary is referring to the lungs. And he quotes a study in there called the Framingham Study. It's a little town in America, and they have done a study on the inhabitants in this little town. And not everyone, I think they did it on about 30,000 people, and they did it over 25 years. It's a very well documented study, often quoted in many research papers. They found that by the age of 50, people had lost 40% lung capacity. Now that's alarming, isn't it? They found by the age of 80, they'd lost 60% lung capacity. Now this week we've been looking at oxygen, the most vital element needed for life. The most powerful way to oxygenate the body is move it, is exercise. The heart starts pumping harder, the lungs go a little bit deeper, taking in more oxygen. When you don't exercise, those lungs don't get that deep breath in that you will always get with exercise. It's an alarming result, isn't it? 40% lung capacity lost by the age of 50, but it is not necessarily so. If you implement this high-intensity exercise, your heart, your lungs will start moving. And not only are your muscles exercised, your heart is a muscle, it's absolutely exercised, but your lungs. And when you start breathing in deeply, you take in more oxygen, and what that does is that gives your body the opportunity to have enough oxygen so that every cell in your body is running down here. How are you going to feel? You're going to be jumping out of your skin with energy. You're going to feel very, very good. This explains why the colon starts working better, the stomach starts working better, the pancreas, the liver, the brain, the skin. Every part of the body starts working more effectively because of this. Because what I showed you here is happening in every single cell. It's getting more oxygen. The energy cycles are working more efficiently. Our eyes see because of energy. Our brain thinks because of that energy. Our ears hear because of that energy. Our liver, our pancreas, our spleen, our stomach, our colon, they're all running according to the environment they're given. You see why exercise is just so important. Doing this early in the morning gets the body up onto a better rate of running. So if you have lost 40% lung capacity, how would you know? Get breathless easy. You get breathless when you walk up the hill. When you do high intensity, everyone gets breathless, that's all right. You might be walking with your friend and notice they're not breathless and you are. Maybe they haven't lost 40% lung capacity like you have. If you have, there's good news, it can be revived. If a person has lost 40% lung capacity in a short matter of time, they can actually go back to 100% lung capacity simply by implementing this high intensity. That's why the high intensity is so important, because it is only that will get those lungs moving. So progressive acceleration of cardiopulmonary exertion. You are exerting yourself. So you can see why Dr. Al Sear's book is called PACE. Let's go back to Doug McGuff, because he shows something very exciting in this cell, as I have shown you. But I want to take it one step further, and because of everything you've heard this week, this will make a lot of sense. There are so many people today that go to bed late, they eat late, and they get up in the morning, they don't feel very good because they ate so late, and they've only got the energy to take a few steps to the kitchen table. Glycogen stores are still all there. Fat stores are still faithfully there. And the food that they put in goes through this energy cycle, but because the glycogen stores are full, most of it just gets shunted over to the fat cells. We are creatures of habit. Our cells are creatures of habit. And our cells have memory. And this is just what they do every day. Shunt, shunt. Dr. Doug McGuff found that his very obese patients had no energy. They're carrying around in their body the most amazing fuel depot, and yet they can't access it. They need shock therapy. Wake up. What's shock therapy? This is shock therapy. Try it. It wakes you up. It wakes every cell in the body up to start running more efficiently. And then that overweight person comes to Misty Mountain Health Retreat. That's shock therapy. No food for 2 days. Well, actually, we give you a lot of food, but it's all liquid, juices. We give them a steam bath every afternoon. That's hot little steam hut with all the steam, into the mountain pool, back into the steam bath. They do that 3 times. And most of our guests are very weary. Most of our guests are actually in bed by 8:30. And this is a real shock to the people that are going to bed at midnight, but they find they can do it. Because they're going to bed early, they're accessing those hormones that help to put them into a deep sleep. And they wake up early. They have a big glass of water, then they go on the exercise program. Can you see we're starting to change the way the body's running? We're starting to rock it. We're starting to rock its very foundations. We're starting to change memory slots. And then when they start to eat, they eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and tea like a pauper. And then they get up in the morning and they start exercising. And when they exercise, quickly the glycogen stores are used up. Because our guests have a thin soup at night. In the morning they have a couple of glasses of water, some with a bit of lemon in it, and then they do their high intensity, they do their exercise. So glycogen stores, they're used up probably within about maybe getting into the 2nd or 3rd set of high intensity, and the body says, we need more fuel. And so the brain releases the human growth hormone. The human growth hormone is called youth hormone. That's its nickname. And the human growth hormone, when it's released, it activates hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase is the enzyme that breaks down fat. Yesterday, we looked at lingual lipase under the tongue that breaks down short and medium chain fatty acids. We looked at pancreatic lipase that breaks down long chain fatty acids. So what fat does this lipase break down? It breaks down your fat stores. Remember that amazing fuel depot in the body? It starts to cause a release of the fat stores. Remember, we're running out of fuel. The body now stops burning glucose as fuel and becomes a fat burner. Let me explain why it does this. Glucose burns at 4 calories per gram. Fat burns at 9 calories per gram. You'll see that in just about every weight loss book you look at. And that's their reason for saying fat is bad. But what they don't understand is what a calorie is. A calorie is a unit of energy. And if you want a high energy food, what do you eat? Fat. We looked yesterday at the importance of fat. We've looked at it a little bit all week. Can you now see why the body starts becoming a fat burner? Because it's going to give more than twice the units of energy that the glucose does. Way back in the 80s, Dr. Atkins showed this. He blew the calorie counting to the wind. He showed very clearly if a person is on a 2,500 calorie a day diet and it's all carbohydrates, they'll put on weight. But if they eat a 2,500 calorie a day diet and it's mainly fibre, protein and a little bit of fat, he said they'll lose weight. It's a pity to know that people are still counting calories, because it's not the calories, there's calories and there's calories. It's just a unit of energy. But it explains why the body now becomes a fat burner. The human growth hormone also increases the body's ability to utilise protein. This week we've looked at the importance of protein. We've defined protein, showing you that the vegetarian protein is a far superior protein to the animal protein, a lot cleaner burning fuel. We also looked at the importance of not drinking with your meals, so you're not watering down your hydrochloric acid, so you can digest that protein efficiently. But now we're looking at another aspect of protein. And this is the release of human growth hormone, increasing the body's ability to utilize protein. The human growth hormone also increases the circulation of the blood to the skin, which means the skin doesn't age as quickly. It means the skin stays supple. It means that if a person is 150 kilos in weight and they implement this program and get down to 80 kilos, they haven't got any big lumps of fat hanging around, because as they implement this exercise, causing a release of the human growth hormone, the circulation of the blood to the skin increases, which nourishes the skin and allows it to be nice and elastic and bring it back in. Have you seen Jonathan Gabriel's book? Amazing pictures in there of this man who was, I think he was 183 kilos. And now he's 83 kilos, something like that. I could have a few kilos wrong there, but hey, when you're looking at 180 down to 80, we can bear that. And he's got a picture of him with no shirt on to his waist, and it looks like the body of a 20-year-old. You can actually count his abdominal muscles there. Wow! And he was 183 kilos, and there's a picture of him as that. He doesn't actually talk about the interval training. He doesn't talk about the human growth hormone. He talks about walking in the morning, jumping down and doing 30 push-ups. So even though he doesn't define it as such, that's what he was doing. And that's why a person can be that big and shrink down and have beautiful skin, muscle tone, because of this interval training. Well, that's a large part of it. I'll actually pull in another part in a minute. But I want to tell you the story of a young man who did our program. He walked across Australia. Took him about 5.5 months. He went from the most western point to the most eastern point. He told me he was walking for 14 hours a day. And he said that within 2 weeks he was eating 5 times the food that he normally ate. You see, it's the release of the human growth hormone, increasing the body's ability to utilize protein. But what he was doing was he was causing, right down at the cellular level in his furnace, he was laying a bed of hot coals. And when you lay a bed of hot coals, you can put the logs in. What are the logs? A nice substantial breakfast. That's like lighting a fire with a few little bit of sticks, and you get a few flames come, and then you put the huge log in. What's going to happen to the fire? And how many people do that? They get up in the morning, few steps over to the table. Those few steps lit a tiny little fire. And then they sit down and put the big logs in, and what does that do to the fire? That's like the people carrying around this huge fuel supply in their body, but they've got no energy. It's like they're starving in the land of plenty. And with these people, the body's in the habit of just shunt. And what's happening to 63% of Australians today? They're getting bigger and bigger. So they go on the no-fat diet. Does it make any difference? Not really. Because as I've showed you this morning, fat's not the problem. The wrong guy has been shot. You can get fats that are harmful. They're your altered fats. They're your fried foods. They're your margarines, all altered fats. Fat as it comes from the hand of the Creator. Very safe fat. But what I suggest, and what we find at our health retreat, and I find it in my life, that when you eat breakfast like a king, and lunch like a queen and tea like a pauper. And then you go to bed early. And then you get up early and have a big drink of water. I usually have 3 or 4 glasses, but then I get up at 5 and I don't walk till 6. So I've been able to get a few in then. And then you implement this high intensity exercise. You're actually laying down a bed of hot coals. And I come back, I have more water. I've already dived in the creek. Very nice. If you don't have a creek, you might just have to have your hot and cold shower. And then I sit down to eat. What did I eat this morning? I had mango and pawpaw and kiwi fruit with chia seeds and almonds and Brazils. Big bowl. Big logs went in. And then I had some sourdough spelt toast with olive oil, cayenne pepper, avocado and savoury red lentils on top. More logs went in. I've laid a bed of hot coals and I can put the logs in. It's as simple as this. If you want to eat, you've got to work for it. So when I sit down to eat, there's no glycogen stores left. Can you see where my fuel's going? It's coming into the energy cycle. It's coming into the glycogen stores. Maybe none even goes over to the fat. Isn't that what everyone wants? You see, fat's only there if excess goes in. If excess isn't going in, it's just going where it's supposed to go. Maybe a little bit will go over here, that's your good fuel supply. It's like when I was in Jakarta and I ate some rice that I don't think was that fresh because I got what they call the barley belly. And for 3 days I was hardly able to eat. I was very thankful that there was a few fat stores there. We need a little bit there. We don't know what's around the corner. Yep, lost a bit of weight, but that's all right. You can put that back on. So many people don't realise what I'm telling you today is how you've got to lay that bed of hot coals in the morning so that your every body function is going to work effectively all through the day. The movie stars pay $1,000 a week for the human growth hormone, but I'm offering it to you cut price today. All you need to do is implement this interval training in the morning, and that human growth hormone will be released and it stays active for 24 hours. What a bargain. Age has got nothing to do with this one. Got that? Whether you're 9 or whether you're 90, this interval training can be implemented. And we are training for something far more important than the Olympic Games. We're training for life. Most people don't make enough preparation for the latter years of their life. And I'm not talking about the house is paid off, the cars are paid off. No. I'm talking about this. Most people don't make the preparation so that the latter years of their life are going to be comfortable. Meaning the body's working. When Colin Campbell, who wrote China Study, when he started to see the dangers of sugar, the dangers of the high carb diet, the dangers of the meat eating, the dairy, he decided to stop it at about the age of 45. And his friend said, "You're taking all the fun out of life." He said, "Fun." He said, "I'll talk to you about fun. I'm 70 now. I'm climbing mountains with my grandchildren." He said, "But the majority of my friends," he said, "about a third of them have already died, and the other ones are walking around overweight and they're taking so many tablets that they rattle when they walk." He said, "I'll tell you what fun is." And I can identify with that. I agree with that. I want my daughter Jessica to come out one morning. Maybe I'm 99 like my grandmother was. I haven't come in for breakfast, and I'm sure I'll be gardening every morning. I'm lying on the path. She comes a little bit closer. I'm dead. How nice. What a nice way to die. Maybe I've got a gardenia in my hand. You know, that's what it should be like. It should be like my mate Heck. He was, I think, 92. He decided to just sit on the lounge after lunch. He was going to mow the lawn a bit later and have a nap. After half an hour, his wife was surprised he hadn't woken, and she shook him and he was dead. Do you know, we've all got to die. Not in every single case, but in many cases, the way we live our life determines the way we die. So this makes this information so important. Dr. Doug McGuff was asked the question, what is the most important, diet or exercise? His answer surprised me. I agree with him, but surprised me that an exercise physiologist would say this. He said, 80% would be diet. 80% is diet. You cannot exercise your way out of a bad diet. And how many gyms are full of people every evening madly trying to work out or work off the bad food they ate that day. In our final lectures, I will be talking about the mind, and I will be showing you how you can increase your willpower so that you can say, no, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to go this way. As you can see by what I've shown you, exercise is a not negotiable subject. I was having an interview with a friend of mine. He came and did our program. His name is Dave. He said, Barbara, I do not have an hour every morning to do a 5K jog. I nodded because I knew he was going to hear this lecture. I said, Dave, all you need is, 12 minutes? I said, you don't need 5K, and your fitness will improve to a higher level with this interval training compared to the 5K jog. And in his book, Pace, Dr. Al Sears, he quotes stories of people that die on their 5K jog every morning. I'm sure we've all read about it. And yesterday we looked at the acid-alkaline balance in the body. We showed how disease thrives in an acid environment. Can you see with the 5K jog, what's happening to the lactic acid? It's just building up, up, up. And there's nowhere for it to go until he has a rest. Again, as I said, it's not the odd day you might do a 5K jog, and it's not the odd day you don't. It's what you do every day that matters. And I was on a mountain climb, this is a couple of years ago. We were climbing a mountain. It's one of those mountains that you think you're to the top, but actually when you get to the top, there's another one and there's another one. An hour and a half we were walking like this. Halfway up, he had all these little machines on his wrist to monitor your heart and your breathing. He said, let me try you. Anyway, he put it on and he went. Now, at the time, I think I was about 56 and he was 35. And he did it and he shook his head, he said, man, you're one fit woman. It's just simple. It's got nothing to do with genetics. It's like your bank account. The more money you put in, the more it builds up. The more you put into this, the more you will get out of it. You've probably heard the old saying, when you exercise, you will receive more energy than you expend. And you can see why that is so by what I have told you this week about oxygen and how that's what exercise does. Let's go to the children's playground in school. And you know, if you just stand there, you know what you'll observe? Interval training. When I was a little girl, we did hopscotch. When it was my turn, I'm going for it on the hopscotch, back, and then I stand back and the next girl has a turn. Interval training. And in the playground break, we would all probably get a cycle of about 6 turns with hopscotch. Same with skipping. We all have turns. We go for it. And then we run out and the next person has a go. Interval training again. Elastics. I hear elastics are coming back. You've got 2 girls standing apart with elastics around their legs, and then another girl jumps in and out and makes all sorts of patterns and things with interval training. Let's have a look on the soccer field. Going for it, make the goal. Everyone's walking back to their spots. Basketball. Goals made, walking back, interval training again. No one tells them about it. Let's go to the African plains and you'll see interval training. No animal jogs, have you noticed? They either go for it or they stop. Interval training. Doug McGuff does a fascinating study on the history of all this and shows that the interval training is naturally done in nature, it's naturally done in children, and by the way, have you noticed how children run? They run on their toes. No child ever runs on their heel. And if you go barefoot and run across the paddock, you will automatically run on your toes. You see, our toes were designed to take our weight. There's all these muscles and bones and ligaments in there perfectly designed to take our weight when we're running, not on the heel. There's a book called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall, and it's a fascinating book. It was only written in 2011, and the reason he wrote the book, Born to Run, is because he was commonly getting hamstring problems and lower back problems. And he wanted to find out why. So he went all over the world interviewing athletes, and he discovered some athletes who run barefoot. And he was fascinated with this. They never have back problems. They never have Achilles tendon, hamstring problems. Bibi Bikila is one of them. I think it was 1960 and 1964 were the two Olympic Games, an African, Bibi Bikila, where he took home gold, barefoot runner. Did the whole thing in barefoot. So this author in Born to Run, he pursues all of this, and he discovers that the foot was designed in such a way that we should never run with the heel. When we run with the heel, that's what causes the hamstring and the lower back problems. That's what he was getting. And he found these people that live in the Mexican hills, in the canyons, that just love running. They just run all day long. And they run barefoot most of the time. But if they're getting to where it's really sharp rocks, they just cut out a bit of tire and then lace it onto the bottom of their foot. So even then it's a very thin sole. And the culmination of the book is this mighty race where he gets athletes from all over the world to run against these guys that are running through the hills. And Nike, of course, come into it. Some of the top brand name shoes come into it. And they give these mountain people some joggers. And after about a kilometre, they sit down, pull them off, throw them away, and go back to their barefoot running. Ever since I read that book, I've started to only buy very thin-soled shoes. You can even buy barefoot runners in the sports shop now, and their shoes are like this. They've even got places for your toes, as I've shown you all week. I'm not a fantastic drawer. And I said to them, how do you wear that with a sock? They said, we've even got socks. Even got socks with toe holes. And somehow they still manage to charge a lot of money for that. But I just buy very thin sole today. I go into the shop, if I want to buy some joggers, I press them up against themselves like that. When I started to do my morning exercise, doing my high intensity runs in these little thin-soled shoes, oh, my legs hurt, because I realised I was starting to use different muscles compared to what I was using in my nice big, I call them lounge chair joggers. You know, they're all cushioned. Oh, instant comfort. But it encourages you to heel strike because of all the padding done at the back. So I started to, I kept my exercise up in my thin soles because I recognised that my legs and all my muscles had to get used to using different muscles. Now I just love these thin-soled shoes because you just bounce along because you've got hardly any weight on your feet and you automatically go to your toe striking. And remember, the whole foot was designed for a toe strike. Just watch what children do. Children breathe properly, they run properly. It's before they're changed by the common view of this is what you should do. I know a friend of mine used to be a runner, and he said, it's just crazy. He said, we were told we had to heel strike in our joggers? And he said, yes, we would commonly get hamstring, Achilles tendon, lower back problems, but he said, that's all changed now. He said, now they're telling you to toe strike. And he pointed to his wife, who's a Filipino girl. He said, watch how she runs. And she just always runs on her toes because she grew up in the country area of the Philippines. So when you do your morning program, important that you enjoy it. And once you get the results, you will be amazed and you will certainly enjoy it more and more. I've got a young friend at the moment who's having a very challenging time with a marriage breakup, and he said to me, I go to the personal trainer. He said, I go 4 times a week, and this personal trainer just gets me working. Incredibly high intensity. He said, I leave there physically exhausted. He said, he gets me to do things I don't think I can do. He gets me to do leg presses, and just when I think I can't go on, he looks at me and he says, 20 more. He says, you think you can't do it, but he said, I push through it. He said, I walk out of there just totally exhausted, but he said, mentally revived. Why mentally revived? Because of the oxygen that's going into those brain cells. You will find with just about every author who talks on any form of mental illness, there's one common denominator that all agree with, and that is exercise. The effect of exercise on the brain, it vitalizes it. It vitalizes it, invigorates and electrifies it because of the amount of oxygen that's getting into that brain, allowing the cells to run down into this aerobic part of the brain, giving that much energy to the brain. Flushes out old, stagnant, negative thoughts and gets fresh oxygen in. This explains why Dr. Neil Nedley, when he's speaking on depression, we've got his book, it's called Depression: A Way Out. And it's a great book because he looks at how depression can be managed by lifestyle. Every chapter starts with someone else's story. He says that when he gets a very depressed person come to him, bipolar, schizophrenic, he puts them on 7 hours of exercise a day. Now that's not 7 hours of high intensity. There's probably a couple of bouts of high intensity here and there when they get to a hill. It might be just walking round the town several times. He says he puts them on 7 hours of exercise a day. After 1 week, they are so improved, he said they can go to a 1 hour a day maintenance dose. Now, that's cheap medicine, isn't it? People say, 7 hours of exercise a day? Well, what's a week out of your life? What's your health worth? So exercise, powerful tool in helping with any form of mental illness. One lady rang me and she said, but Barbara, I know, but I just don't feel like getting up and walking. And I said, well, sometimes you have to grab yourself by the scruff of the neck and just pull yourself out there. Just put them on, put those shoes on, just push yourself through there. Like this young man, he said, when he has finished this workout, he is physically exhausted, mentally revived. There's an old proverb, it's actually found in Ecclesiastes, it says, the sleep of a labouring man is sweet. And this is why when people implement this exercise, they sleep better. Because every cell in the body is getting oxygenated. And do you remember when we looked at oxygen, we looked at how it invigorates, it electrifies, and it vitalizes the body, but it also soothes the nerves. So this young man who's going through this incredibly challenging time is able to sleep. It's hard to sleep straight after a workout, but he sleeps several hours after the workout. And he said that he also found that he needs to eat more food. Because remember what he's laying in here? He's laying in here a bed of hot coals. And the logs can go in. And when you got a bed of hot coals in your fire, no matter how many logs you put in there, it just burns brighter and brighter and brighter. We had a young man came into our program and he was about 35. He said 3 years ago, I broke my leg, the tibia and the fibula. He said, I was in hospital, ended up being there for 3 months because he said I had to have a plate there, pin and plate. He said it didn't quite take, so they had to do it again. He said they had me in traction. I said, whoa. He said, when I left that hospital, I was the fittest I had ever been. I said, excuse me? You were in a hospital bed for 3 months and you left there fit? He said, yeah, I got my mates to come in. They set up this gym equipment all around my bed, and he said, every hour I'm working out. So no excuse. You're in a hospital bed, still no excuse. You just got to find out how to do it. You got to find out what works for you. If you're a little unstable on your feet, you might find an exercise bike works because you can hold on to it. In these high intensity, you can put in your weight training. You can put in your resistance training. You can put in your strengthening of the abdominal muscles training. And that's what I loved about Al Sears. He said, do it in the backyard. He said, do it on the veranda, do it in your lounge. You just got to find out what works for you. But once you are bitten, once you taste it, I can assure you now that no one will be able to deter you from such a thing because of what it'll do to your life.